Hello, everyone. Welcome to Older Queer Voices podcast. I'm Raga D'silva, your host for the podcast. Today on Older Queer Voices, we're exploring how community, practical support, and advocacy come together to make life better for the LGBTQ plus people as we grow older. Our guests have decades of experience delivering services, shaping policy, and building networks that support queer lives across the UK. LGBT Foundation is one of UK's leading queer health and community support charities. Based in Greater Manchester, it provides a wide range of service, including helpline support, talking therapies, domestic abuse support, community safety support, recovery programs, and advocacy for trans people, and reaches tens of thousands of people every year. In 2025, LGBT Foundation celebrated its 50th anniversary, marking half a century of life saving support, community empowerment, and advocacy for queer people across the country. As part of this anniversary, the charity expanded its Pride in Aging program, a dedicated initiative to support, empower, and advocate for LGBTQ plus people over the age of 50, people like me. We will speak more on this. And welcome Dr. Paul Martin, founder and CEO of LGBT Foundation.
Hello.
Welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you, and good to see you as well.
And Tina, welcome to you. Tina Wadden, Head of Education at LGBT Foundation. And just want to take permission from both of you. One, may I call you by your first names to make the conversation easier?
Of course.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, I'm going to start with something that I always start with because our listeners need to know right from the beginning. They want to know a little bit more about yourself, about your journey, and what brought you to this work to this point. So I'm going to start with Dr. Paul.
Hi, just please call me Paul.
Paul.
Yes, no, absolutely. So a bit of clarity. I've not been working for 50 years. We did celebrate our 50th anniversary. I came along about 35 years ago. I founded one of the organisations that merged with Switchboard to create LGBT Foundation. 35 years is a long time, but I've not been quite doing it for 50. And so my journey is a really, really interesting one. I was at university, getting on, doing what I thought I was going to do. And then my father found out I was gay and disowned me, threw me out the house, disowned me. And it 35 or so years ago, back in the day when your whether you could go to university or not was based upon, and whether you got a grant was based upon your parents' income. I couldn't get a grant. I couldn't get my fees paid. There wasn't such thing as student loans then, so I had to leave university, and I ran away to Manchester, not knowing what to do. And so I got involved with what was then the Gay Centre, and started to do some HIV prevention work with gay and bisexual men, and founded an organisation called Healthy Gay Manchester, with a number of others. And that organisation grew and developed, and then merged with Manchester Lesbian and Gay Switchboard in 2000 to create the Lesbian and Gay Foundation, which later on became LGBT Foundation. So I've been involved for about 35 years. So I am a founder of a lot of the work that we do. And I think that I am incredibly motivated to give something back to my community. I work with amazing people, both as staff and as volunteers, and I've been very, very privileged in my career to have amazing people that have supported me and mentored me as well. And we're now the largest national organisation working with LGBTQ+ community, supporting over 55,000 people a year.
Wow, Paul, that's some story. I'm just sitting here listening to you. I'm thinking, was it good for us that you didn't go to university? Because we found you.
Who knows?
But I know many such stories from back in the day. And Nicola is one of them as well.
Yeah, I've been asked a lot of times, what made me found an organisation. I don't know why I chose founding an organisation instead of getting to boys and pills and booze. I don't know what that was about, but I suppose it's just the way that I'm made. But yeah, I suspect that not going to university meant I had quite a bit to prove, and I created a logical family around me when my biological family had abandoned me at that particular time.
I like that. Logical family versus biological family. Well, I'm going to stick with you. Do you ever look back? Do you ever reflect and wonder how your life would have been? Would you have, if should you have gone to the university?
Not really. I'm somebody that is really always looking at what's next. I'm not one that really does a lot of looking back. I never had a career path. I don't have I still don't have a career path. I'm still waiting to know what I'm going to do when I grow up, I think. But I think I just think about what's next, what's the future hold, and look at the situation as it impacts on our communities, and then kind of come up. I think at my heart, I'm a social entrepreneur, so I think I kind of help create different initiatives, different services that help to meet needs. So rather than being overwhelmed by things that are going wrong, I mean, it's a very challenging and difficult time at the moment for many people in our community, and people feel that their rights are under threat. My response to that is to look at what we can do to make things a bit better, how we can improve things, how we can kind of support people. So I'm not really one for lots of reflection. I think I am where I am, and my colleagues have been trying to encourage me on my 35th anniversary to write a book, and maybe I will do something, but I always find something else to do about the future and what's next, as opposed to doing the research and writing that book. Although Stevie and Gareth, I promise I will be doing something very soon.
I love it. I love it. I can see that our conversation is going to be super, super interesting. Tina, I'm going to come to you. And Tina, I'm very, very curious to know about your life and where did it start and where do you find yourself now?
Yeah, hard to follow Paul, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of in a roundabout way, really. So I went a very traditional marriage with children very early when I was 18. So that kind of socially acceptable route. Found myself at 30 street homeless and without my children, and kind of picked it up from there, I think. And in terms of LGBTQ organisations, I used to volunteer in the early 1990s with a friend organisation when we still had friend organisations. Went to university quite late, decided I'd do a degree when my children were teenagers, and then got involved in women's services, so domestic abuse services, and then ended up working for LGBTQ housing services for about 12, 13 years, and then have landed at the foundation, which is great. So yeah, a bit of a wobbly path, I always say.
But we've worked together for a good 15 years, though, Tina.
Yeah,
I think, haven't we?
Yeah. So when I worked with, I used to work for Stonewall Housing, and we worked quite closely with LGBT.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to end up at the foundation.
So interesting. If you don't mind me asking, you said that you were made homeless at the age of 33 and no kids. Was it to do with your sexual identity, or was it something else completely different?
No, with my sexual orientation. So I was married to a man, and finally decided that I really needed to come out, even though I'd known him since I was about 11, and came out and basically got thrown out of the house with no children. So and was street homeless for a while and sofa surfing and those kind of things. I mean, eventually it kind of righted itself, and children ended up living with me and things like that. But yeah, it was it was all about my sexual orientation. It says on my divorce papers that my wife left me declaring she was a lesbian. So
yeah, that's interesting because we hear about these stories from the past. We hear about people coming on our show and talking about the interesting conversations they've had with their then partners, and how they were disowned is the word, or abandoned is what I call it, really. And we don't need to sugarcoat it. I used to say, oh, we were ostracized. No, actually abandoned. And that was a reality, that lesbians lost their families, they lost everything, and you're one such example. So thank you, Tina, for existing, really, and for being here as a role model for many of us No, it is very important to have these conversations. Paul, I'm going to come back to you. I'm very interested, before we go into further into our conversation, about this 50 years of celebration of the foundation. How does it feel to be an organization that has 50 years? And do you think that you've been part of creating change, or has the change created you?
Well, a very philosophical question. I mean, just the first part, it is amazing to have been celebrating 50 years of extraordinary achievement. Thinking back to 1975, Bohemian Rhapsody was in the charts, Jaws was on at the cinema, and a certain female politician had just been made leader of the Conservative Party. So it was a very, very different world then. And a very, very small group of incredibly brave and courageous volunteers decided they wanted to do something to look after their community. So they've been doing some fundraisers for a couple of months to generate enough money to open up a telephone line, and that was run from somebody's flat at the bottom of the stairs. And they advertised that telephone number, which was somebody's home number. They advertised that on posters all around the city of Manchester. And in order to kind of like, promote the service, they put photographs of themselves kind of like together on those posters. So real bravery back in 1975 to kind of like, be quite so publicly open. And what was amazing, because of course this was during 1975, so it was actually 2025 that we celebrated our 50th anniversary. And what was really great was that the helpline, or the switchboard, started on the 2nd of January 1975, and on the 2nd of January 2025 we brought together a lot of people to have a bit of a tea party, and we had some of those original volunteers there, and then we're able to get volunteers from every decade of the last 50 years together. And we estimate that we have provided about 3.7 million minutes of advice, information and support through about 250,000 telephone calls in that 50 years. And that's just an amazing achievement if you think about it. More or less all of it volunteer run, volunteer organized. So we are genuinely standing on the shoulders of giants. So it has been amazing to celebrate that, and it's been amazing to sort of like look at other things that we have achieved in the last 50 years, just in terms of the range of services, the breadth of services, the impact they have had. And that has been a very humbling kind of experience to have not just done that research, but actually also been privy to sort of like some of the incredible successes that we've achieved. And, looking particularly at this moment in time, lots of LGBT organizations are in quite vulnerable situations, are under threat, really struggle to kind of like get funding and get kind of support. So the fact that this has been a continuous service for 50 years, that this has been something that, come rain or shine, day in, day out, has been there for our community, has been extraordinary. And I'm incredibly proud to have been part of that. I'm incredibly proud to have helped shape that, particularly over the last 35 years. And you asked the question, has it shaped me or have I shaped it? I guess a bit of both, really. Similar to Tina, I found myself, when I ran away to Manchester homeless, not knowing what to do, all of my plans in tatters because I could no longer carry on doing what I was doing. I had to spend my first night in Manchester in a homeless shelter in order to go on the waiting list to get council accommodation. Tina's nodding. I suspect that she was in exactly the same position down south. And those things kind of like really help to shape you, don't they? I mean, Tina obviously is similar to me in terms of, rather than letting it, overwhelm her and kind of like drive her down, it's that inner sort of like, person going, do you know what, I'm going to use this. for my upliftment and kind of growth. So I've clearly helped shape things, but I also think it's helped shape me as well. And I guess the same is true for you, Tina.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it shaped me. Yeah, I can think of, there were some awful moments when I remember going to get, like, at the time we could get crisis loans from social, and I had to go to the office and get a crisis loan because I had no money. And when you've been there, you kind of think, actually, there's nowhere else to go but up. And like you say, it kind of it shapes you, but I would say you do it in spite of it rather than because of it. It does shape what you are. So yeah, when you've been there, and also understanding about my sexual orientation, that's why I ended up where I did, and that gives you that strength to go, I don't want this to happen to one other person. If I can change that for one other person, then that's what I need to do. So that's kind of what fires me, I think, is
brilliant. Tina, I'm going to stay with you on that, and the work that you do now. What is the kind of work you do with the foundation now?
Oh, so I'm responsible for all the training that we do. So anything, and that can be, it's quite wide ranging. So we work a lot with primary health. We have a really good project called Pride in Practice, which has just awarded, since Pride in Practice has been operational, which I think is about 15 years. Correct me if I'm wrong. We've just awarded our 751st GP practice. And it means over the 15 years, we've trained 28,802 health professionals is the statistic that we have. And that's a phenomenal amount of people to train. And it is that thing around changing lives for LGBTQ people. You know, if that's what we set out to do, then training is a really important part of that. And the messaging that we give around, you know, terminology, pronouns, all that awareness stuff is so important. And we train a wide range of people. So we have Pride in Practice, which is across the country. We also have Greater Manchester. We're commissioning Greater Manchester to deliver to all primary health services in Manchester. And we also do what we call Training Academy, which is the more kind of generic, some bespoke training. And that can be everybody from corporate to charity. And that can be very much depends on what it is that they would like us to deliver. But it's always about that improving life for LGBTQ people. So thinking about how organisations work with their customers and really empowering people to get it right, really, and looking at best practice. So it's a wide-ranging portfolio that we have and lots of different things that we deliver. And that's what I do. Kind of
Great. So do you see a shift in thinking from a healthcare perspective? Because, for instance, care homes, I know I've been talking to quite a few people on the podcast and otherwise, and care homes seems to be still in a state where there is a lot of homophobia, transphobia. So I know training is important, but does it shift? Is it shifting? Do you have some kind of feedback for us?
I don't know that it's, I would say, so talking about care homes particularly, we have a product called Pride in Practice Care Award, which is specifically for care homes. And I would say there's still a lot of work to do in that sector, particularly because I think one of the issues with when you homogenize groups of people, you strip them of any identity. So when we talk about old people, when we talk about homeless people, we kind of lump everybody together and we don't allow them any kind of personal attributes. And we think about care homes, when people go into care settings, you don't allow anybody any kind of sexuality. So there's nowhere for LGBTQ identities to be recognised. And it becomes very much around kind of the day-to-day running of a care home rather than thinking about, you know, people talk about person-centred care, putting the person at the centre of what they do. But in order to do that, you need to know about things like sexual orientation, gender identity, because then that's a much more holistic approach. I'm not sure that I think in care homes it's not shifting particularly. There's a lot of work to do there. I think with GPs it's often quite difficult as well. But I think over the 15 years of Pride in Practice there's definitely been a shift. I think we're a long way off. And I think GPs are under a lot of pressure in terms of timings, in terms of you know, just being able to kind of have those added extras to the work that they do. But it's really important that they do. And that's, you know, and we have GPs on board who really champion the work that we do because they see how significant it is and how important it is for our communities. And what happens in terms of disconnection with primary health services particularly, it contributes to our health inequality. The fact that you don't get a great reception at your GP surgery means that you might not go back, and you might, because he doesn't feel like it's a safe space. So part of what we do is about is teaching organisations how to create that safe space, and how to create a safe space, a space for people to be their authentic selves, to be able to tell you without any fear or shame or any of those things. So is there a shift? Not sure, but I think we still have quite a long way to go with all of those things.
But I agree with you, Tina, and I've seen it in my own experience where, 10 years ago when I used to go to the GP with my partner, I had to like come out every 5 seconds because they obviously didn't have anything in their system. Now I don't. Now they just, maybe I go too often now, I think. They just know me, which I should stop. But I can see a slight shift in the way the language that is used now. You spoke about simple things like pronouns. I've seen lanyards, the little lanyards that when you look at those lanyards, pride rainbow lanyards, and you think to yourself, okay, this person is an ally. So little things that they're doing, and I'm hoping that it changes more visibly and more actively so that people like us don't fear going to the GP or to a consultant. And I'm going to come to pride in aging now, to you, Paul. And I was, tell me more about pride in aging. When I was researching, and I felt that this was quite significant. And why was it set up, and how is it doing, and why is it important to have programs like this?
So it's a program that is aimed specifically to people over 50, LGBTQ plus people over 50. It's run by, designed, and delivered by older people. So it's very much something that is co-produced and co-designed. And it provides a range of different activities. There's definitely a social element where people will kind of like, meet on a regular basis and go on trips and social activities. They have organised a range of programs. So they've at the City Art Gallery in Manchester, there's a Jarman garden, and they were given a plot of a plot in the library grounds that they have turned into a garden, and they sort of like have been looking after that for a number of years, and it's based and inspired in part by Derek Jarman's garden at Dungeness, so it suits sort of like the urban landscape very, very well. There's a very, very strong arts and culture part of the program, so there have been exhibitions and sort of art-based activities and sort of like drawing classes and all sorts of things that have been kind of created. There's been radio shows. I'm sure there's been podcasts as well. I mean, you name it, they've been involved in it. But as Tina said, there's also a very, very specific piece of work that's aimed at sort of like, improving older people's care, and particularly the Pride in Practice Care Award, making sure that care homes are more appropriate, more respectful, and more accessible. I think Tina's absolutely right in terms of sort of like the challenges that exist there. I think that we're currently in a populist period of politics, and it feels really okay to be very disparaging and quite discriminatory against minorities, refugees, people seeking asylum, people of colour, anybody that is different from the norm, whatever that is, and that includes LGBTQ plus people, particularly trans and non-binary people. So there's a toxicity that's kind of there that actually I think has given courage to some people within mainstream public services to be disparaging or discriminatory against people, whereas 5 years ago you just wouldn't have spoken out. Now people feel it's easier to speak out, or it's okay that people have been given the green light, and of course that's not okay at all. The other challenge that Tina has, of course, is that carers and care assistants very rarely have any development time or very little educational time. And so any training that we might offer has to be done in their own time. And quite often their employer don't give them access to any tech. So if they are going to do online training, they'll have to have their own phone or their own laptop enabled to do that stuff. So there are real challenges in terms of delivering and improving services. And of course, let's not forget, in the care sector, there's a lot of transient people. There's a lot of people. It's a very low-waged industry, and there's a lot of people that kind of come in and out of that industry. And so some people will have different cultures or different belief systems where queer identities are not respected or not included. So that can also be another challenge. And pride in ageing is I suppose, recognizing that we as a queer community are getting older. And as we age, we are living longer. Sometimes we're living longer with longer periods of ill health or multiple different longer term conditions. So the number of, we might be getting older, but sometimes our quality of life becomes much more compromised. And so therefore, I think it's really, really important that we are treated with dignity and respect. And I suspect, Raga, the same with you, Tina and I, you're not going to accept anybody kind of like, putting you in the corner or treating you in a way that isn't sort of like dignified or respectful. And so therefore, we are, as older queer people, much more likely to speak out and have higher expectations. And pride in ageing, in part, is anticipating that and trying to raise the bar. But also it's important to know, and I'm sure some of your listeners will know this anyway, that the census recorded sexual orientation and gender identity for the first time in 2021. So we know there are at least 90,000 LGBT people over 65 across England and Wales. And we know there was a great amount of underreporting. So we know that number is the minimum. But what we also know is that there is a significantly larger number of people between the ages of 45 and 65, some 350,000 people that are not far from retirement ages. And over the next 10 to 15 years, there's going to be a greater number of older queer people that will have be quite uncompromising around the sort of like, standard of services that they will expect. And so the age profile of the service users at LGBT Foundation, I think, will be changing during that time. There'll be a greater number of older people. We're involved in a scheme with the City Council and one of the housing associations locally in Manchester about creating an extra care scheme. It will be the largest of its kind when it launches next year. There are going to be at least 80 1 and 2 bedroom units that will be available for rent, and it will be a majority LGBTQ plus over 55s. And there are a couple of other schemes that we're sort of like supporting and involved in. And so we're very, very keen to sort of like, ensure that not only the quality of existing services aimed at older people improves, but actually we create our own bespoke services as well. And we are quietly optimistic that we will be able to fill the extra care scheme with those 80 plus units of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments.
Excellent.
With members of our communities. So I think that, I go back to my original point of sort of like looking at the problems and creating social responses and social solutions to some of those kind of problems. And one of the things that we did back in, I think it was about 2015, is we did a piece of research with older people. And the key issue that we found was about loneliness and isolation, people feeling very, very excluded, people not feeling part of the commercial gay scene, that being too young, a lack of social activities for older people that embraced LGBTQ plus people. We'll all know, some of your listeners will have been involved in situations where older LGBTQ plus people have been silenced or been made invisible or have been even sent to Coventry and things like that. No offense to anybody from Coventry, but sort of like, been treated badly because they are LGBTQ plus. And what we wanted to do at the foundation, and some of the work that Tina is leading on, is very much about wanting to create celebratory, joyful and hopeful spaces and solutions that ensure that with the remaining time we have, we don't just live with dignity and respect, but we live with hope and joy. And it's no less than we deserve.
I love everything you said, Paul. Everything. I just want to pick on 2 points. It's just one is the care homes. I'm going to come back because it's my favorite topic, because I have spoken with so many older people, and these are activists who have been really active, and we've kind of followed them as heroes and
Yeah.
special, people, the giants, that we of the shoulders that we stand on. But the problem is, most of them don't even want to get on the podcast anymore, and they say to me, "I am back in the care closet."
Yeah.
Because I have fought enough. I have done my bit for the community. Now I have to look after myself. And my next problem is, if I need the healthcare system, if I need to go into the care home, I don't know whether I'll come out alive or how I'll be
No, I
treated.
agree. I agree,
Yeah.
and I think it is scandalous,
Yeah.
and we know Ted's story and sort of
Yes.
like what happened to his husband, and there are plenty of other stories similar to theirs that have kind of like gone untold, and that's why we think it's really, really important to create queer celebratory spaces, and our extra care scheme has just been called Kindred House, and that was a public process to kind of like get that named, and people were really, really keen that they didn't want it to be exclusively LGBTQ plus. They wanted it to be inclusive of all people, but you've got to have sort of like the right values, the right approach to life, and sort of like to make sure that you are celebratory of LGBTQ plus people, and I think that's where we're that's what we're about, and that's what we want to do. I mean, Tina has been is co-authoring a report that will be out later this year looking at LGBTQ plus aging. We're working with Care England to try and sort of like set up a national benchmarking process to kind of like really force that training. We want to do a roundtable with the Minister of Care, and we're waiting to try and speak to members of Louise Case's commission looking at aging and looking at sort of like social care to make sure that the needs of older LGBTQ plus people are not overlooked. And we're working with Stonewall, we're working with the Outstanding Society, and as I say, Care England, and I'm sure a few others will want to work with us to start a national conversation about these needs. So go back, look at the problem, come up with creative solutions. We will have an older people's space, probably the end of next year, for Manchester residents. There are other schemes popping up around the country. We'll work and support those, and we will continue to have this conversation about making sure that the needs of older LGBTQ plus people are met. And I never want to hear that people feel the need to go back into the closet, because we feel that's where it is safe and that's where they won't be targeted. That has to absolutely stop. And we need to kind of like make sure that people are celebrated and cherished in their end of life. And I repeat again, I can't see us three going into the quiet of the night. And sometimes that's what it takes. Sometimes it just takes Gobby Queer to kind of like get things changed and get things done. But I also want to make sure that older people have the tools, have the support, have the tools to use to kind of like bring about those changes as well. So I can see us providing more and more services to the over 50s over the next 10 or 20 years. And that's not just because that's the age range that I'm in. There are other reasons for that as well.
Why not? Why not? But I must tell you about social housing. You've heard of tonic housing, right?
Yeah.
Tonic housing is the UK's first affirmative social housing for people over 55 from the LGBTQ community, and I'm a resident there, so I can tell you my whole perspective on aging in the queer community changed the day I walked into tonic housing. As soon as you walk into the gates of the building, you know you're safe. You're with your community. You talk about loneliness and isolation, which is a huge problem. I mean, it was a huge problem for me as well, even though I'm just my mid 50s. For me, it was like, where do I talk to people? And, people of color, it's quite hard as well. I can't see any elders in my community anyway.
Yeah.
So tonic housing or a space like that, where you say it's celebratory and it's joy, people have no idea. The listeners need to understand this, that how much that little thing that most people take for granted, we cannot, because our lives are quite different. A lot of people ask me, Paul and Tina, they say, but why do you need all this? I mean, we welcome you, and they don't realize it is one person saying that. Overall, it is quite stressful. I mean, I don't even come out to my Indian families here because it's so difficult, and it's so, they'll make it look like it's a shame,
What I would say, though, is that we're talking about over 55. We're talking about older people. I would argue that this is probably quite true for just about every generation of LGBTQ plus people.
Sure.
Because cast your mind back when you might have been on the scene, cast your mind back when you might have been part of that dating pool. You could be very, very lonely in the middle of a crowd then. So I think a lot of us LGBTQ plus people are carrying around a fair amount of trauma with us, from fear, from shame, from sort of like, discrimination, from rejection. And we carry that with us. We can be our own worst critics. My internal voice sometimes I have to turn off because it is so negative. I mean, I've achieved a fair amount. I've done quite a lot of good stuff. You wouldn't know it listening to the voice in my head sometimes, in terms of the way in which it criticizes me. And of course, when my father stopped criticizing me when he died, I've taken over from that. And so I think that we can quite often be really, really critical of ourselves and our community at every stage of sort of like, our development stuff. So yes, of course, we need to do a lot of work with the O55s, but I also think we need to do a lot of work with every generation as well, because I think that is equally as impactful when you're younger as it is when you are older.
I agree, Paul. I'm sorry to interrupt. I totally agree with you. And therefore, one of the things that we are doing with Older Queer Voices is making sure that we have intergenerational conversations.
Yeah. And that was one of the things I was going to say about Pride in Aging, is that they're doing more and more intergenerational work, and that is going down an absolute treat, and so it's really great.
In fact, we're doing a roundtable at the UK Houses of Parliament on the 5th of May. And this is where we're bringing in activists, older and younger, and allies, and saying, okay, what's next for us? Because the generation, like you said, we are aging. And at the same time, the younger people are also aging.
I think Adam and Laurie are part of that. I think two of our colleagues, that one of them runs the housing project and one of them that runs Pride and Aging, I think they're part of that initiative.
No, this one is independent of any of that. This is Older Queer Voices doing an independent conversation. Okay. Yeah, but we'd be happy to invite you, of course. I just wanted to, I'm very aware of the time, and I just want to touch upon, before we go, I heard something about village angels. Mm-hmm. What is that? I'd love to know more. Tina, do you want to take that question?
Paul probably has more knowledge of village angels than I do. But they are, as I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, they are a team of people that go out in the gay village supporting people who are out at night, people who need to get home, if there's kind of medical emergencies, that kind of thing. I'm not sure how long they've been going for, quite a long
15 years. So,
Yeah, 15 years.
and not just in Manchester, we're also just in Liverpool. And a couple of years ago, we were in Soho as well, when Westminster Council funded us. And it only stopped because of the funding stopping. But it is about making sure the you know, when you go out, your night ends right. And primarily volunteers that volunteer until about 4 o'clock in the morning. As you're running away from crises, they're running towards it. You know, it's fascinating reading sort of like the log sheets, the Monday after the weekend. It's every Friday night and every Saturday night. You know, fingers being found on floors and wrapped in sort of like ice and taken to hospital for them to be sewn back on. People being pulled out of the canal, people being talked down off of buildings, all sorts of sort of like things that can happen that put people at risk. And it's a partnership very much between ourselves, the council, the police, the door staff, the venues. And again, you know, a problem 15 or so years ago, there was an increase in hate crime. There was an increase in attacks to people that were on the periphery of the gay village. So we just recruited a load of volunteers, trained them up and put them in pink high-vis jackets. And of course, they walked around and made sure that everybody was safe and secure. And they support about 18,000 people a year with challenging situations that sort of like, you know, everything from calling an ambulance because somebody has sort of like collapsed or has kind of like gone into some kind of like shock, through to helping people that have lost their phone, lost their friends, or lost their minds on a night out and sort of like got into difficulty.
So these village angels, I know that you said they wear a pink vest to be identified. How do they feel safe? What kind of training do they receive that they are safe just walking around? I'm gay, you know.
Well, they receive a lot of training. We don't just kind of like throw them out there on the street. But a lot of the volunteers are from the professions, from nursing, social work, police, you know. So a lot of the volunteers are kind of like from some of those professions. But they go out in teams, so there's never less than about 6 or 7 of them together at any one time. And depending on how many people we have, we might have more than one team going out and about. But they watch out for themselves, and I mean, you definitely have there's a certain type, a personality type that's sort of like attracted to that type of volunteering. You know, community organizers, people that are used to being in charge, people that are used to sorting things out. It's not unusual for them to have to sort out crowd scenes, or sort of like, you know, where there's a difficulty or if there's a fight, in terms of sort of like, you know, bringing that to an end and sort of like stopping people from kind of getting involved. But I think that they will look out for themselves. I mean, of course, we've got very, very clear guidelines. They are never, ever to put themselves at risk. They are to walk the other way if there's a situation they feel they can't control. But as I say, there's very rarely a situation where they don't feel that they've got something to contribute. You know, our angels are the ones that are running towards a problem rather than running away from the problem. But we do a lot of work. They are the most sociable team across the whole organisation. They will regularly go out, socially support each other. Their WhatsApp group is very, very lively. And we've had a couple of weddings. We've had a couple of marriages of people that have met on Angel Shift. And so the manager that runs the Angels had to buy a couple of hats for weddings that he's been invited to.
Gosh, it's fascinating, all the stuff that you're doing. It's like, I wish we saw this in every part of the UK. I mean,
Indeed.
a part of me says we don't need to wish for that because we should feel safe, but I know we are not fully safe. And this is such a fantastic concept. I really hope it can be replicated.
Well, as I say, it was in Soho for a couple of years. We had the Soho Angels, but then the funding ran out, and we can't do it without funding because, you know, we make sure that the Angels get a taxi home because they're working until or volunteering until 4 o'clock in the morning. They need to have other expense, out-of-pocket expenses. They need lots and lots and lots of training. You have to provide them with chips at midnight. If you don't provide them with chips at midnight, they'll go home. We want to make sure that they are dry and waterproof, so their kit is kind of quite important. And we've had I should say they, two of the people will carry full first aid kits on their back as they're out and about. And we also have one of those, I can't think what they're called, but those units where you can kind of, if someone's had a heart attack, defibrillator. We have one of those that we was donated to us as well, so we take that out and about. But again, it goes back to being practical, pragmatic. It's good old northern pragmatism, finding solutions to the problems that other scenes experience. We've had a couple of areas that have copied us, and there's a couple of areas that we're talking to about possibly expanding the service to. But yeah, I agree with you. I think every commercial gay scene should have an angels team every Friday and Saturday night to make sure that everybody's okay.
And I hope listeners who are listening to us today and watching us on YouTube, I hope that they are able to help fund this very fantastic initiative and everything that you're doing at the LGBT Foundation. We've run out of time, but I'm going to...
Okay, can I just mention a couple of things that people can do to get involved? If you come to our website, we have a newsletter that you can sign up to. We also have what we call a community action network. And we would love for your listeners and viewers to join us. We are trying to, generate the most diverse list of people that we possibly can. We are always being asked to participate in surveys or consultations, or people asking for us to put people forward. And so our community action network is a group of people that we are cultivating to do just that. So if anybody wants to be a bit of an armchair activist, we would welcome you with open arms. And of course, if you feel that you want to kind of make a financial contribution, we'd be more than happy to accept your donation. And there are ways in which you can do that outlined and explained on our website, www.lgbt.foundation.
Okay, so www.lgbt.foundation.
Yep, that's the one. I think so. Is it right, Tina?
Yep, absolutely.
I think that's what it is.
Thank you so much. Just before we go, I just want to ask both of you a similar question. What does the word queer mean to you? And Paul, you can start, and then
okay,
end with you.
Well, I've moved on the word queer. I didn't particularly like it a number of years ago, whereas now I actively embrace it. I probably would identify as queer. I think it is an inclusive term. I think it's a term that we have reclaimed. I know that some of your listeners and some of your viewers will find it problematic and difficult. If ever I'm working with an older crowd and I use that term, I always will get challenged because people have been called it in the past and they don't like it. But I think for me, it has the potential to be a very, very inclusive term. And I really embrace it. And as I say, I think probably I identify as queer these days rather than as a gay man.
Brilliant. I just want to know, would you ever change the LGBT Foundation to Queer Foundation? Would that ever, or is it too strong a brand now?
I think it is a very strong brand, and we had a long conversation a couple of years ago when we did change from LGF to LGBT Foundation, and there was lots of discussions about adding the Q and the I and the A, but there was a real challenge in terms of sort of how it would play out in different audiences. I think language naturally changes. Would we call ourselves the Queer Foundation? I'm not sure. I can see quite a few people having objections to that. But LGBT Foundation is a very strong brand. And, our tagline is about where queer, hope and joy can be found. And so therefore we are using the word queer within our overall kind of governance language.
Brilliant. And Tina, final word from you about the word queer.
I would say Paul and I have been on a very similar journey in that I initially really disliked the word queer, and that's how I describe myself now. And I think it's because it feels really inclusive to me. And I have quite a rainbow family, and we talk about being a queer family.
Yeah.
And yeah, for me, it just encompasses that real inclusivity. And I've done that real journey of, I don't like it. Like Paul, whoever I'm working with, I'm quite mindful of people that I'm working with, and always talk about, is it okay? I'm going to say this, is it okay? And it's quite interesting.
Sorry.
It's quite interesting when we're training and we're talking about it, and we talk about how language changes, but also that something about the power of reclaiming the word is we talk about queer hope and joy, and there is something about reclaiming that word for us in a really kind of joyful way, whereas it has really changed, I think, the dynamic around the language. And so for me, it's how I describe myself.
Yeah, I mean, we're two old pros, aren't we, and stuff. So actually, for us, using the word queer means that we don't have to kind of sometimes get tripped up by LGBTQ plus, and actually queer is something that sort of like encompasses everything. What I found out recently, particularly with a little bit of work that I was doing end of last year, is the number of people that might have previously identified as heterosexual but have found themselves in relationships that are no longer heterosexual because their partner might have changed or evolved in some way or other, that they're starting also to kind of like refer to themselves. It was your mention about queer families, Tina, that kind of like just made me kind of like remember that the term queer is being used by lots of people that might find themselves in poly or asexual or other forms of relationships, or whose partner might have come out as trans or non-binary, and sort of like are on a journey as well. So I think that queer is a word that certainly for now can absorb and encompass all of that. But I think from my perspective, I'm always deeply respectful of people, often older, not exclusively, but often older, that really don't like it and haven't been on that journey and object to it greatly and stuff. So it's probably too soon for us to be the queer foundation, but we definitely use that more and more and more. And two old queers like Tina and I, sort of like,
and me and I.
I at the helm of the foundation, it's inevitably going to change as we kind of go forward and evolve.
It's great to hear your thoughts, both of you, because queer is a word that Nicola and I decided we're going to reclaim, because we exactly had the same issue. Nicola comes from New Zealand, and her conversations around the word queer itself, like for years and years, I've been with it 20 years, I've heard conversations so negative, but now we need to change it, everything that's negative to positive. And I love your tagline, Paul, really love the tagline. And it is about, joy and celebration. And thank you so much for your time today. Great conversation.
We're happy to come back.
Oh, wonderful. Great conversation. We will have you back.
Maybe you should come up to the Kindred House when it opens end of next year.
Sounds good.
Both Tina and I have been to Tonic. And our old friend Bob runs Tonic anyway, so we have very, very fond memories and fond thoughts about Bob and our work with him. So come up.
I've never been to Manchester, so I definitely will.
We'll definitely have to then.
And we will have you as a guest on various other things that we're doing. We'd love for you to be part of that. We are celebrating Older Queer Voices anniversary as a festival in June, 3rd of June, and I will send you an invite for that. Would love for you to be there and celebrate with us. And we have to close now. So as we close today, thank you very much to both of you for all that you shared today. I'm really, I think we are richer from this experience. And what we have heard today is that community is intentional. It is built with care. It's protected through advocacy that both of you seem to be doing. And it survives because people show up. 50 years of LGBT Foundation reminds us that we are still here and we're still fighting for dignity, safety at every age. Older queer voices exist to make sure our stories are heard and our lives are valued. So thank you for that. So thank you. I'm going to call you Dr. Paul Martin again, and Tina. Thank you. I love it. You've earned it, obviously,
Yeah.
and sharing your valuable insights. And I want to take this opportunity to thank our partners, our outreach partners, because of which we're able to have these conversations. So, Out and Wild, GFW Clothing, Outspoken Speakers, Ageism is Never in Style, Proud HR, and my G work. Thank you so much. And Nicola, thank you so much for doing all this for us in the background. We wouldn't be here if Nicola wasn't here, because I'm really bad with technology. And to our listeners, thank you so much for listening to us. If you have any feedback, if you want to share this podcast, please feel free to do so. We are at theviewsroom@gmail.com. Feel free to nominate anyone that you want to as well. At theviewsroom@gmail.com. And until next time, thank you very much.